NLP quantum linguistics, using the theory of Cartesian logic applied to language for influence. The basic, keep it simple concept of quantum theory is the study of the interaction of matter. That's atoms and subatomic particles and the energy that surrounds them. To get your head around this, it's important to understand that the densest matter known to us still has more space within it than matter. Yet we quantify and qualify it on the lesser component. Or do we? Are we perceiving the shape and form that is the matter? Or are we perceiving the energy that creates and maintains the shape and form of the matter? Or is it both? Bottom line is energy and matter interact and give form, and that form becomes our perceived reality. Oh, and our next training video is going to be all about time, space, matter, and energy, and how you can look to disrupt one or more of these aspects so as to change the perceived and believed structure of a given problem. So do like and subscribe if that's something you'll be interested in learning more about. Anyway, for something to exist in reality, then it's just as important that everything else around it must not be it. So whether you think it's real or not, you need to not think of what it isn't being when you didn't know what it was before you realized what you think you thought it is right now. I know, my head is hurting already as well, but bear with me because this is really cool stuff. Let's first of all think of a very simplified example. Have a look around you in your room, if you are in a room, and I'm sure there will be a chair. And as you notice that chair, you'll realize that everything else around that chair is not that chair. The chair is only real to you because of its own unique boundaries that defines it. There may be another chair, it may even seem to all intents and purposes the same style of chair, but it can never be the same chair because it's a second chair, unique in its own right. Also have a think about the solid reality of that chair and try to work out in your own head, if you were to begin to break down the components of that chair, at what point in your perception would it stop being a chair? If you removed the fabric that was covering the seat of the chair, would it still be a chair? If you removed just one leg of the chair, would you still see it as a chair? Have you ever bought a flat pack chair from somewhere like IKEA? And was it still a chair in your perception when it was merely on the shelf, flat packed in a box before you even bought it? So for you, when is a chair not a chair? How about we think about it from a slightly more mind-bending example? Now, I can't remember where I ever heard this, but when I did hear it, it sort of made sense to me, so I'll share it with you now. Say you have a glass of water, we'll call it water 1, and a bowl of water, which we'll call water 2. The water in the glass is obviously different from the water in the bowl. Now, what happens when you place the glass directly into the bowl? Both water 1 and water 2 are theoretically in the bowl, but water 1 and water 2 are still separated by the glass. This is what we call the boundary conditions that are there to define each of the individual components. The bowl has changed, water 2 has changed, even the glass has changed, yet water 1 is still exactly the same. Now, if we were to remove the glass, as it's the only boundary that's causing water 1 to be unable to be changed, then we end up with a complete change that affects the whole. When you pour the water from the glass into the bowl has changed because it now has more water in it. Water 1 and water 2 have both changed because they've become water 3. And the glass has also changed because it's now empty. So think of your client as the bowl and your client's neurology as the water within it. And think of the water in the glass as the client's problem. And the glass itself as the linguistic boundaries that continue to define and contain the problem within it. With quantum linguistics and Cartesian logic, we can easily break down the boundaries that define the problem, allowing the unresourceful thinking that was held within it to dissolve within the client's neurology. And as a consequence, the problem can no longer exist, which is great. So how do we use the principles of Cartesian logic when applied to language, and how does it work? Well, when a client has a problem, there will be a belief statement that represents and maintains their problem. In Cartesian logic, we have the theorem, which is A equals B. We have the inverse, which is A equals not B. We have the converse, which is not A equals B. And we have the non-mirror image reverse, which is not A equals not B. Let's take a simple example where the client is sad and believes they are sad because they're lonely. This we will view as an A-B statement, which is the theorem. We know this because of the presuppositions of existence and cause and effect, and the client has actually said, I'm feeling sad because I'm lonely. Now, the structure of the questions that you're going to ask them is very important. You'll have heard the old saying, if you want a better answer, then ask a better question. Most people only know to look at logic from one angle, and this will only stimulate so much information. If they've been asked to explain the structure of their belief, the why question, if you like, then there is a good chance that they're very good at answering that question, and answering in a way that has continued to make logical sense out of the problem being very real for them. This information will be useless to us. They are already aware of it and has thus far done nothing to change their perception of the problem. When you ask a better question, you'll have a far better chance of uncovering new, helpful, positive information. Information that will help to loosen the hard and fast belief that they have around the reality of their problem. Now, if you manage to do it really well, the problem can lose its emotional charge and its meaning completely and disappear. This is where you have taken them beyond the thresholds or the linguistic boundary conditions that have been required to maintain their problem. In other words, the skewed logic that they've used to date to validate the problem and keep it in place. So step one is to first acknowledge what it is that they are feeling and feeding, allowing you and them an awareness of the I am, the because or the that means of the problem, whilst also acknowledging the emotion it has been stimulating for them. Because there's no point of spending any amount of time around the theorem, because we already know that that's not been helpful. We can decide to test the other three angles to see if in their mind we can help them disprove the structure of their current reality. We're doing this in an attempt to bring into their awareness any and all additional deleted, distorted, and generalized information that will help show the belief to be an illusion. For this example, say the client is feeling sad and the statement that they have used is, I'm feeling sad because I'm lonely. So step one is to simply acknowledge the problem statement. You're feeling sad because you're lonely. This is the theorem. This is the A equals B statement. Now, I don't like to use a direct negative statement back on itself. I do like to soften it a little bit rather than repeat the negative in the exact same categoric structure. So I would say to the client, what I'm hearing is that you think you're feeling sad because you're lonely. This is to orientate them into their internal representation of the problem as our starting point. Now, please note, you can only break through and go beyond the boundary conditions from the starting point of being within the boundary conditions of the problem in the first place. So step two is to stimulate the thinking from the inverse perspective of the theorem. This is asking them if A, at any time or in any way, cannot equal B. The structures of the question would have to be along the lines of, have you ever felt sad because you're not lonely? As they answer this, more than likely all new information will come out. Keep encouraging them to keep the flow going with little thought or editing until you feel they have emptied out. Step 3, next we're going to stimulate the thinking from the converse of the theorem. This is asking them, can not A ever equal B? The question would perhaps be something like, can you ever not feel sad because you're lonely? Same process as before, encourage them to let a stream of consciousness flow with little or no thought or editing till they again have emptied out. Step 4, finally we've arrived at the point that we've been wanting to test all along. We're going to stimulate their thinking from what's called the non-mirror image reverse of the theorem. This is where we'll be asking them, can not A ever equal not B? This question would be framed as, have you ever not felt sad because you're not lonely? Again, let them try to make some sense of it and find an answer. Then encourage the stream of consciousness to continue to flow with no thought or editing till they have completely emptied out. This is how we can use the principles of Cartesian logic to linguistically create a flow of new and no doubt very different information. During each of these 3 steps, you may get a nugget of gold that will completely contradict their original problem statement. You may also get additional skewed logic that you can establish as a new starting point and then challenge that in the same way using the same sort of structure of questions. Now, the point being of all this is whatever we get will be a representation that they have metaphorically and metaphysically moved off the spot they were standing in. That original position that allowed them to believe their problem statement was their truth. And if they're no longer there, then they must be somewhere else. And from that somewhere else, as you look back on where they were, it has to have changed in some way because of the shift in perspective. This process works so well because the logic that was used to create and maintain the problem wasn't even logical in of itself, nor truly valid. So this process is merely asking their neurology to uncover all the linked, missing and skewed data that has had to stay hidden so that their thinking could continue to maintain their old problem. This gives you a complete 3-dimensional appreciation as to the structure of what is not the problem. And this awareness of all that's not the problem will help confuse and make difficult what was believed to actually make up the problem. If it's flawed logic that maintained the problem, then creating a confusion around the problem and all that it's not, in such a way as to make it difficult to remember, this can only be a good thing. Imagine getting so confused that you forget how it was that you used to do the old problem, or even what the problem was in the first place. Now, in our next video, we're going to continue this quantum theme, and we're going to be looking at the linguistic representation of time, space, matter, and energy within the structure of a problem from a quantum perspective, and what happens when you effectively test and change each and or every one of these 4 elements. So if you'd like to learn my take on all of that, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as it's free and it helps us here at the channel to continue to create and share advanced linguistic influencing concepts, tools, and techniques as we continue to learn and evolve and create positive change together.